For this episode of Mendix Malt, I wanted to talk to my good old friend Herman about his experience using Mendix, the SDK, and the concept of tripwires. To do that, I had to take a trip across the pond to Montreal, Canada.
Who's there? I'm busy modeling.
You feel like a beer? Hey!
How's
Hey,
it, man?
How's you doing?
Good
Great to see you.
Come in.
Hi, I'm Derek. Welcome to Mendix Malt. Today I'm in Montreal with Herman Geldenhuis. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the Mendix SDK. So welcome, Herman. So you've built some really exciting stuff in the Mendix environment, in the Mendix ecosystem.
Yeah,
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about some of those things that you've built?
So it ranges from a variety of stuff like the Mendix SDK, utilizing the SDK a little bit.
You can build stuff in Mendix. Obviously, it's a development platform. But if you now start to use the SDK, you can almost build additional things inside the environment that's
True.
not exposed through the modeler.
Yeah.
Right.
So it allows you to dig in the actual metadata of a project. And there's a lot of funky stuff that you can do with the metadata.
Give us some examples of what metadata is in regards to an SDK.
So your project consists of objects like microflows, data entities, regular expressions, constants, all the things, all the sort of the atomic
Elements
of a project.
Yeah.
Those things describe code at the end of the day. You use a GUI, a modeler, to model a solution, and that then gets generated into working business server code, which is more closely, it's basically binary.
Yeah.
So the metadata is just describing what the model looks like.
So it gives you a way of kind of interrogating that data model and whatever you're working with other than visually through the modeler.
Yeah, that's right. So it allows you to script basically things that you would normally do through the mouse,
Right.
like clicking and adding and
Right,
manipulating stuff like a modeler would do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so that means you can do some pretty powerful stuff with it. But I think before we get into how powerful it is, I think we're going to need some good Canadian beer to actually talk about that.
Sounds like a plan.
So we're going to go out, we're going to get some, let's hit the road.
Cheers, Derek.
Okay, we both got Broken 7, which is a beer brewed in Montreal, which is actually what caught my eye. That's why I thought why I thought I would enjoy it.
They say it's the sportsman's beer. I got the Montreal Blonde Ale. I only picked it because of the pretty label.
Okay.
I'm not a big beer connoisseur, but I do appreciate a good beer when I drink one.
Okay, cool. Well, I got the Pale Ale, and I've got to say it's quite nice. It is light. It is very consumable. Yeah, so if you're in Montreal, you definitely have to order one of these. It's really good. Cool. All right. So we were going to talk a little bit about the things you've built using the SDK.
That's right. That's right. We have a very big team.
Okay.
And managing teams and large projects has its own special set of problems. For instance, we've got something like 6,000 objects in our project.
Yes.
And when you refactor large portions of it, you end up clicking a lot with the mouse. You get carpal tunnel syndrome in one day.
Yeah.
Just by refactoring something trivial that is as a knock-on effect, like a chain effect.
Yeah.
And so the SDK is useful for heavy lifting. It's a long lever. It allows you to do a lot of things by scripting it. Once you've got a recipe that you can repeat, you parameterize the recipe, then it makes recurring refactoring a lot easier.
And so that's a refactoring tool you did. Tell us a little about one or two of the other applications you wrote with the SDK.
So the SDK, I primarily haven't done a full product, but I have done recipes with it.
Right.
I've implemented the ability to go and enforce conventions. And a cool trick that you actually told me when I was back in South Africa was tripwires. The concept of setting up tripwires for developers.
Right.
So as you hire new people that get on the team, or you employ new resources, they don't have the historical knowledge of all the conventions that led up to the point. Even if you document some of it has a historical context implicitly.
Right.
They don't know about these things. So, and you don't want to impede the speed of development for a new resource. You want to almost give him just sufficient rules of engagement, and then let him steamroll through his development, and have these tripwires that are essentially triggers that remind the developer to, hey, you did this, you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's like almost like a definition of done by the computer.
Right. So like if you build a new web service or you change the integration point, there are other teams in the organization that need to know about
that are dependent on that, like BI or who else? The release and config team, or DevOps, as they call them. Like you create a new constant that needs to be defined for each environment. Dev, QA, pre-prod, production.
Yes.
And developers are usually just concerned with what's in front of them immediately.
Yes.
So traditionally you would have to tell the DevOps team, hey, this is the value. Sometimes you forget.
Yes.
So the tripwire reminds you.
Cool.
To do a follow-up on those kinds of things.
So that type of thing, you can either you can take those tripwires. A constant is a great example. You know, the DevOps team, whoever is releasing that software, needs to know about it at release time.
Yeah.
And so you use the SDK to either email them or create documentation, or the developer to say, okay, hey, you need to remember to do this.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like a if this then that kind of thing.
Yes.
Every time you commit something, the SDK sort of loops through the new objects.
Yes.
Or the objects that you've changed.
Yeah.
And it sees if there's a rule defined to trigger off.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool, that's very cool.
Okay, cool, no doubt.
Okay, so somebody who wants to actually learn about this SDK and implement it, what would you recommend? Where should you start?
Paradigm shift. Like anybody that starts out with Mendix, you have to, especially if you're a developer, like a traditional developer background, a paradigm shift is required. The SDK is exposed through using TypeScript, so it's a JavaScript-based language, but they don't give you the entire model when you use the SDK. They use a pattern called promises. So you have to wrap your head around promises first.
Okay. So first understand the concept of promises before you, or once you crack that, you'll be able to understand and
Yeah.
improve the rest of the SDK.
Yeah.
After that, it's programming, but the
That's right.
concept is the thing to know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thanks for coming on board. It's been really great.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Oh.
And we'll make a plan. We definitely will have a follow-up when you're visiting Cape Town, or if we find each other in another part of the world.
Anytime.
We'll make a plan. So until next time, cheers. Yes, I think you look so hardcore.